Joining us now, former chairman, 2nd Congressional District Republican Party, Gary Byler. He's also the Hampton Roads chairman of the Donald Trump for President campaign. Hey, Gary, good to have you, man.
Good morning, John. Beautiful day in Virginia.
All right, we got Snowmageddon on the way. Let's get to this crazy redistricting. What is going on in the 2nd District? What is going on with Scott Ridgel retiring? We had him on our show 2 days ago, and he said that if the redistricting holds, that he was going to encourage, campaign for, give money to, and otherwise endorse Randy Forbes in the 4th District to run for Congress in the 2nd District. What do you make of this whole thing?
Well, one thing at a time. First off, Congressman Ridgel called me right after he called his family on that fateful morning, and I gave him my heartfelt congratulations. I could hear Terry giddy in the background, glad to have her life back. If you go back and look at the footage of the night George Allen lost re-election for U.S. Senate, everybody looks like they're at a funeral. Susan Allen's trying not to burst out laughing with her with her happiness of having her life back. So I congratulate Terry and Scott on getting their life back. People are like, well, why is he doing that? Oh, I don't know. Instead of getting up at 6 a.m. and being cursed at in the snow of D.C., maybe he'd like to enjoy some of the fruits of his labor. So my best to Scott and Terry, and it's a very thankless job. The redistricting is a daggone mess, John, and I'll be honest with you, not only do we not know how we're going to nominate our candidate, we don't know who's going to be making that decision. As you may know, the Supreme Court of the United States has already agreed to hear the appeal of the Fourth Circuit. I found it very strange that the Fourth Circuit would draw new lines, order them to be implemented immediately, since the Supreme Court had already agreed to hear the appeal. Now, the deadline for filing briefs on whether or not this should be stayed, I believe, is today and tomorrow. I fully expect that the Supreme Court of the United States will issue a stay and that we will be running under the old lines and that Randy Forbes will be running for re-election in the 4th Congressional District. I do not have any clerks on the Supreme Court of the United States telling me that, but 35 years of legal experience and 40 years of political experience tells me that that's where we're headed. I think everybody's getting out in front of themselves, and you can say they heard it first on the John Fredericks Show.
Okay, so you believe that the Supreme Court, which we expect any day now, right, sometime this week, well, this week's over, probably by the end of next week, you believe, Gary Byler, that they're going to issue a stay, basically taking the lower court redistricting ruling and saying, hey, wait a minute, let's just stay this until we decide it in a couple of months.
Yeah, but let's use our term carefully. When you say the lower court, the federal district court agreed with the lines and did not order them redone. It was the middle-level court, the 3 federal court panel of the Court of Appeals, that voted 2-1 to overturn them. So if you're keeping score, that's 2 federal judges who said they're okay, 2 federal judges saying they're not okay. But the Supreme Court of the United States has already agreed to hear the appeal of the Court of Appeals. It would make massive difficulties to try to work a schedule under the new districts, only to then have the Supreme Court overturn the districts. And now here's something that's bizarre. The Washington Post, the Richmond Times-Dispatch go into great detail as to why the Supreme Court needs to act in the next 2 months because of the June 1 primary deadlines. Are you kidding me? Nobody's determined if we're going to have a convention or a primary, and if we're having a convention, the tentative date now is the last Saturday in April. It's not June, it's the end of April. So this really needs to be resolved in the next week or so. We've got a meeting set for the 2nd Congressional District. I understand the chairman has called it for the 27th. I plan to attend with proxy and to open the discussion about the method of nomination. But going back to your point about Randy, Congressman Forbes, if in fact the lines stay as they have been redrawn, then it is kind of strange. Andy Fox came in and we chatted a little bit on air, and I pointed out that Randy Forbes had a lot of goodwill built up in this area, and that his seniority would be something that people would look at. But my question was, how many folks in the new second were in the old fourth. If 20 or 30% of the district were in the old fourth, then I think Congressman Forbes would have a legitimate point to say, hey, wait a minute, I've represented these people for 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 years, however long he's been up there, and why should I quit representing them just because the lines have changed? And my cursory review after that interview indicates that apparently there are 0 voters in the old fourth and the new second. So I'm not sure where that leaves us. I will tell you that this is a textbook example why, in my opinion, we need a fair redistricting process. I have joined the One Virginia 2021 folks. In fact, they had a reception last night. Wyatt Durrett was the attorney giving them a little briefing, and folks from the far left, folks from the far right, people in the reasonable, intelligent, near right, such as myself, are on board trying to get some kind of fair. It's just ridiculous the way these politicians try to pick their voters, and then when it doesn't suit them, they go cry foul.
It's beyond ridiculous, but right now, until the Supreme Court does something, whether they issue a stay or whatever they decide to do, right now, the district, as of today, is how it's been redrawn. And look, what you say, Gary, is legitimate, and I like Randy a lot. He's been on our show many, many times. He's been probably on the John Fredericks Show more than any other congressman or elected official. So he's been very good to us, and he's my congressman. He's a great guy, does a fabulous job. But you do raise a good point, which is exactly 0 of his constituents are going to be in the 2nd District. So, and he does live in Chesapeake. That's where he's grown up. So basically, it is a little odd situation. Even if there was 10 or 15%, you could make an argument for it. There's 0. So I guess the voters in that area are going to have to figure out if that's what they decide to do. I want to get to the nominating process is very convoluted. Nobody understands it. I get a different answer from everybody I ask. You kind of went through it. Lay it out. When is the meeting, and how is it going to be decided, and when is it going to be decided what the nominating process will be?
Well, the 2nd District Republican Committee will vote to determine the nominating process, and they have not met. One of the further complications is we're only now figuring out who gets to vote on that process. That is to say, the committee's makeup is substantially different under the new lines rather than the old lines. So we've got our new friends from Pecoshin and Williamsburg and James City County who have not been members of the committee, and we will lose such stalwarts as Carl Anderson and Cliff Dunn over in Newport News. So the dynamics of the district have changed inside the actual voting body. There's a meeting scheduled now, I believe, for the 27th of the 2nd District Committee to discuss the nominating process. I understand that the chairman is suggesting that we wait another week to make the final decision on the nominating process. I would probably defer to the chairman on that, determining on, hoping that the Supreme Court will make their move by the 2nd or 3rd of February. I think any time after that, we would have to go forward. At that point, the district committee would vote as to whether or not to have a primary in June or a convention, probably the last week of August or the first week of May. My concern about the primary, John, is if you get, and we've got at least 4 candidates, 5 candidates, will probably be 6 or 7 before it's over with. The concern some folks has if you get into a 7-way primary is that somebody could win the nomination with 15 to 17% of the vote, and I don't think anybody wants that outcome.
Hey, Gary, hold that thought right there, because what you just said is why I have changed my position from being pro-primary to 100% pro-convention. I've done a 180, and it's tough to do in today's environment to do a 180 on something as, shall we say, emotionally charged as this issue. But I have changed my position 100% just for what you said. You can get 7 or 8 people in a primary because there's no majority, there's no runoff in Virginia, the way it works. Somebody can get nominated, get this, with 17 or 18%. basically somebody could say, I'm just going to dump in $500,000 or $750,000. They get 18%. They win. There's something the matter with that. I mean, that's just not a good process.
Well, it's not good for democracy. It's not good for the party. I don't think that gives us our strongest candidate. By the way, John, welcome to the side of light and justice with the pro-convention forces. You know, I have not every single time in 40 years supported a convention. There have been on very rare occasions where I've supported a primary, and I think they ought to be looked at individually. But I've said it 100 times, you know, when people ask, well, the elected officials demand why I won't support a statewide primary, I politely explain that I neither write $50,000 checks nor do I produce TV commercials, so I really don't have a role in a primary. The only folks that have a role in the primary are the ones that give 50 or 100,000 or full-time political professionals, which I decided in 1983 that I didn't want to do that for my life's work, taking paychecks from politicians. So, you know, the political class that gets paid to do this for a living and the high-dollar donors are the ones that decide in a primary. And quite frankly, I think there should be some input from somebody other than the professional political class.
Okay, let me just get this straight again. So the 2nd District, you're going to wait until next week to find out if the Supreme Court stays the redistricting. Okay, and after that, the chairman, the 2nd District chairman, is Curtis Colgate. He's going to call a meeting to determine the nominating process, right?
That is correct.
And is that meeting open to the public? Is it open to the press, or is it closed?
Well, when I was, as you know, I was district chairman for the previous 6 years, and who knows, it may be the once and future chairman. I'm getting a lot of calls about the race this time around. I'd ask my friends to keep their powder dry. I'm not exactly sure how this is going to shake out, but the district meeting would then determine whether it's a primary or convention, and anybody who tells you they know the outcome of that vote today, John, is pulling your leg, because I have been through the list of folks, and there are a lot of folks who are usually pro-primary who are vehemently opposed to a 4-way primary for the reasons we've discussed. There are probably 1 or 2 normal pro-convention people who are thinking, let's just give it to Randy and be done with it. So there are a lot of moving parts to this thing, and it's like nothing I've ever seen.
So is it backed by popular demand? Gary Byler, he is the former chairman of the 2nd Congressional District for the Republicans. He's also the director of the Donald Trump for President campaign, Hampton Roads director. So he's wearing multiple hats right now. Gary, we're trying to figure out 2nd District nominating process. It's going to be decided by 2nd District committee members. You don't know who they are because the district is changing. But when is that meeting going to happen? And then you got to get a majority one way or the other. When is it happening?
Well, the meeting, by the way, that's a great travel schedule. Very impressive. That's definitely the A-team going down to Java Joe's. I'd say I would join you, but how about I miss Iowa, New Hampshire, and catch up with you in South Carolina or Florida, John?
You got
I'm not sure about that 4 a.m. Iowa wake-up call. The district committee should be making a pass-it-through decision on the 27th. They may make a final decision then. I understand from the chairman that he may push that decision off till the following week, February 4th or 5th, and I would support the chairman in that if the Supreme Court has not already stayed the order. If the court has stayed the order, then we can go ahead and take care of the business. But if they haven't, I think he's probably wise in giving it another week, because if we vote to have a convention or a primary on the 27th and the Supreme Court votes to stay on the 28th, then we're back to square one. So it's a little confusing, but nobody ever said democracy was neat.
Okay, so during this meeting where the committee decides, I'm going to ask the question again, are you guys going to, is Chairman Colgate going to open this up to the media so that we have full transparency?
Well, I can tell you when I ran the committee for 6 years, we invited any and all folks who wanted to come in, and our business was always on the table. There may have been a couple of minutes where we had to go in executive session. I don't know that that's true. I would presume, but I have not spoken to Chairman Colgate on this issue, but I would presume that the media in general would be welcome, and I'm absolutely certain that if I were chairman, John Fredericks would be welcome in any case. So I would direct you to their communications director, Turbo Cohen. But if you're asking me, I say, come on, John, we'd love to have you.
Okay, well, we're going to try to find out when it is and get there so we can tell everybody exactly what is.
Well, it's going to be in Hampton, and we've got the specific address and all. I don't know that I've got it sitting here right at my fingertips. As I told you earlier, I'm on my way up to Richmond to talk to our friends in the Center Right Coalition to make sure nobody is sucked in on this quote-unquote market solution to global warming by adding yet another layer of taxation, i.e. the carbon tax. I think you and I had spoken about that before. You know, it's we'd love to find market solutions to problems, and the carbon tax was pitched to conservatives as a way for the market to assess some money for the damage. You know, when gas went to $4 an hour and people were crying, I tried to explain that the best solution to high gas prices was high gas prices. The market has a way of doing this, and I don't think there was ever any benefit to the carbon tax idea because, one, it is highly, highly regressive. Number two, I think it's just an additional tax, almost akin to the VAT tax that Ted Cruz is now pushing. If in a perfect world, if you could get rid of some other taxes, then we could have that conversation. But until they repeal some of the other taxes, conservatives should oppose Cruz's VAT tax, the carbon tax, and any other kind of damn tax until we can repeal some of the others. So, and of course, it seems like the market has found a pretty good solution for carbon export, and it's called natural gas. So, I'm hoping that we can convince our friends in Richmond to put this one to bed. And as always, if any of your folks have any questions, I'm available 24/7 at GaryByler.com.
GaryByler.com. So,
yeah, they want to get me personally, Byler at GaryByler.com. Get you to my personal email, and I turn around within 24 hours. The other big item, of course, John, is delegates for the Republican National Convention choosing our nominee. I know you and I, thank goodness, are on the same team. We are very excited about a massive turnout on March 1 to make sure that we've won the primary. But as you know, Donald Trump is very, very committed to staying in Virginia through the district and state conventions. As your folks probably know, being a little more knowledgeable, it's one thing to commit the delegates into March 1st. It's another thing to have people on the floor at Cleveland who actually support the candidate. We don't need people who are quote-unquote committed to Trump but stand up and cheer during Jeb Bush's floor demonstration. We don't need people who are quote-unquote committed to Trump but vote against us in procedural matters. So it'll be our job to make sure that we send a delegation to Cleveland that is firmly committed not just in name but in actuality to Donald Trump. So the game will not end on March 1. March 1 is an important date, but we're going to need all the Trump folks to file for these funny conventions wherever the lines may be.
Well, this is going to be very critical, and that's why myself and Councilman from Chesapeake, Robert Ike, are running in the 4th District on the Trump slate to be delegates there. We're running a campaign for that. We think it's absolutely critical. You can get more information by going to TrumpDelegatesVA.com. That's TrumpDelegatesVA.com, where our stuff is there. We're going to be having some fundraisers coming up soon, and I'll let everybody know exactly when that is. But you need to definitely help us out. Send us to Cleveland. But
John, I know you like breaking news, so let me give you 2 pieces of breaking news that actually haven't even made it up to Rubino and the Trump leadership so far. We have 2 major endorsements to announce in the Peninsula area. Former Delegate Tom Geer, who is beloved by our conservative base, contacted me, and even though he has some health issues, has agreed to serve as a delegate and publicly endorse Donald Trump. Right. We're looking forward to having him join us in Cleveland. And last night, one of my favorite people in politics, he left the Republican Party. I can't say I blamed him. But he is back in now, excited about Donald Trump, and that is none other than Dr. Bill Thomas, the Vice President of Hampton University, a very welcome voice of reason in the African-American community. He is back energized by Donald Trump and will be formally joining our team, I'd say later this week, but I guess we just did it, didn't we?
Well, look, it's good to have everybody on the team, but as you say, getting the delegates there to Cleveland who are for Trump is so critical, not only to just be there, and cheering for Canada, but rules. We saw what happened. Look, I was live in Tampa on Radio Row during the Tampa Convention of 2012, and under the radar screen, Mitt Romney sent an army of lawyers in, descended on rules, changed the rules, basically thumbed the grassroots in the eye. There were not enough people there mobilized to stop it. Morton Blackwell, that's our national committee man, went crazy over it. But it was so fast that they got all these changes made because we didn't have enough people there that were standing for us. So that's what we need to stop. The other thing is. There's always the possibility that Trump doesn't get a majority of delegates and win on the opening ballot. If that happens, if he comes up 100 or 200 short, if that happens, all hell breaks loose on a second ballot, because when you get to a second ballot, any of the binding commitments are over. Then anybody can vote however they please. And if you don't have Trump people there, it puts the candidacy at risk, right?
Oh, absolutely. And let me give you one better. Even if he has a very narrow majority, these folks would try to steal it from us by manipulating the rules. I was there very young in 1976 in Kansas City, Reagan versus Ford. And while the Ford people went to, as I recall, the Mississippi delegation, which was 100% committed by law to Ronald Reagan, but by using pressure and incredible amount of presidential appointments, got hardcore Reagan delegates to switch voting with Ford on a rules battle that absolutely killed any chance of the Reagan insurgency in 1996. So we're not talking hypothetical. I've seen it done on a national convention floor, and if we came up short, that would be one thing. I don't think we're coming up short. What I'm concerned about is Trump coming in with a majority, a close majority of delegates, and then being cheated out of the nomination, which would be a disaster for our party. Who was it who wrote the book, Win So Big That They Can't Steal?
Right.
That's our game plan for Mr. Trump.
Right, win so big that they're unable. That's right, they can't steal. By the way, that you said 96, I was 1976.
76, I say 96.
Okay.
I lose a decade just like that.
And the chairman of the Mississippi delegation, because I was there also. I was a very young man, Gary, because you're much older than me. I'm kidding. We're about the same age. Anyway, the chairman of the Mississippi delegation was a guy by the name of Clark Reed, right? Gray hair. And you're right, because the Mississippi delegation came in and they committed to saying we're going to be there was 26 of them or something, and they said we're going to vote unanimous one way or the other. The majority of the people on that committee, those delegates, like 20 of the 26 were for Reagan, and they were going to vote 26-0. And the pressure that was put on them by the President Ford people, Gary, was unbelievable. I mean, it was nonstop, and they were able to switch him over, and that was the end of it.
Well, John, I'm very impressed. I haven't heard Clark Reed's name in 30 damn years. Yeah, you're exactly right. And one of the delegates actually took to hiding in our hotel room to avoid we had 8 people to a room back there, college Republican revolutionaries, and one of the delegates actually took to hiding in our room to avoid the Ford people. Hey, there are a couple of federal judges made out of that race, so politics is a funny game.
That was just an interesting time. I mean, you really had to be there to see what exactly went down, and the establishment just going out of their minds to stop Reagan. And even at the end there, remember he picked Dick Schweiker from Pennsylvania, who went out to the ranch and they hit it off. Schweiker, it was kind of a moderate at the time, ended up being extremely conservative after that, went with Reagan on almost everything, stayed in the Senate. But they were attempting to get some of the Pennsylvania delegates, remember?
Oh, yeah, if they had switched Pennsylvania, it would have happened. But, things happen for a reason. Perhaps we needed 4 years of Jimmy Carter to give us the 12 wonderful years of the Ronald Reagan era. So, I am so optimistic, and the party establishment is not going to want to be messing with Trump, and I'll tell you why. Mr. Trump's poll numbers are going to show that he is bringing hundreds of thousands, millions of new voters to the polls, and energy that our party needs, not just at the top of the ticket, at the lower end of the ticket, and energy, quite frankly, that America needs. So I think the quote-unquote establishment will be coming along in 30 days to 6 weeks. So, John, there's always room on the train, but those of us know that the folks who get on the train first get the best seats. So I'm sure everybody will be getting on the train in 6 weeks, but any folks who want to help us now, Byler at GaryByler.com, let us sign you up. No matter what district you're in, we'll make sure we plug you in.
Okay, I got to go to a quick word from our sponsors. When I get back, I'm going to ask you the big question: how do we get rid of this pledge? I'll be right back with Final Minute with Gary Byler. Back with Gary Byler. Gary, we got 1 minute. How do you stop this ridiculous pledge?
Well, you get an uprising of all right-thinking conservatives to call their representatives on State Central and ask that they repeal it. I know that two of our local State Central Committee members, both Roger Miles and Cheryl Hargrove, are signing pledges asking that it be repealed. This is exactly why we shouldn't have primaries for this nonsense. We've been through this battle 3 different times over the last 15 years, and it always ends up the same way. We look foolish. Loyalty pledges have no meaning, but they upset 1 out of 6 or 7 people in our base. They're bad politics. I'm sorry, I thought we were in politics. If it's bad politics, we shouldn't be doing it. So I am vehemently opposed to that statement, and I will be circulating a petition or joining a petition calling on John Whitbeck and the other members of State Central Committee to do the right thing. And I guess when you've got Chairman Colgate on, you can ask him as well. I've asked him to join our effort, and we'll be hopefully speaking with him on this topic soon.
We're out of time. More info, Byler at GaryByler.com. We got to stop this pledge. Thanks for being